Acheampong, good evening. Thank you for joining us on Ghana Tonight.
Good evening, Alfred. Good evening to our listeners.
I took time to run through the major pointers just to lay a good foundation for this conversation. I mean, you've seen this policy, even prior to today. Does it excite you in any way?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think this is the major industrial policy tool that this administration intends to roll out. In terms of what they call sub-programs and sectors, it's not that dissimilar from what we have seen from other administrations. You can go all the way back to Kwame Nkrumah's first 5-year development plan, and then the second plan, and come through to Acheampong, down to the last administration with the one district, one factory, and a few other concepts that they tried. But I think what is fundamentally different this time around for me is the fact that this has been well thought through, and it also connects the systems on an end-to-end basis. What I mean by that is that we're not just identifying sectors. So, for example, under MIG 24, and rightly you pointed out the focus on the 5 strategic manufacturing value chains. So agro-processing, textiles and garment, pharmaceuticals, machinery, and construction materials, right? They are not just identifying the sectors, but they are also connecting the factor inputs that you actually need to make these sectors work. So hence why things like the funding, things like the logistics, things like the industrial skill centers that allows you to have the agglomeration effect becomes quite important. Secondly, and I think this is also very important in terms of why this is a bit different, is the fact that you also have very clear monitoring and evaluation components to this. In fact, when you take the document and you go to the back, you've got very clear indicators on how or what success would look like at the end of the day should we push all this $4 billion USD into the 24-hour economy program. And then you also abstract from that, and you can see very clearly again that it's linked to productivity, importantly, improvement. And if you increase productivity, for sure, your GDP growth is going to pick up, and you're going to create jobs and overall improve the well-being of the people. So I personally think it's actually a very well thought through intervention package. I have always been in favor of the 24-hour economy concept, even before it became a big ticket thing on the political agenda. What is important now going forward is the issue of implementation, right? Where are we going to get that $4 billion to put on the table? There's mention of PPPs, there's mention of Development Bank Ghana, Venture Capital Trust Fund, some other funding models, including even crowdfunding. So basically, you and I and ordinary citizens can actually put money into supporting some of these projects and interventions. And that's the bit that it'll be interesting to see the exact operationalization of the concept. I think that there might be a secretariat, and there might be some sort of bigger body that would push through and ensure that there are synergies and the different ministries, the different government departments are talking across each other and ensure that we deliver at the end of the day.
It's a very important point you make about implementation, because as we've seen, it's not just about even the implementation, but the effective and efficient implementation of this document, is it not? Because we saw, for instance, Planting for Food and Jobs. It's cost us almost $1 billion within the period of implementation. But then the attendant effect, or the objective we wanted to have with this Planting for Food and Jobs, we didn't realize it. We still had prices of the food items higher even within the period when we were spending more money on this policy. So then the question then remains as to how we can track and ensure that the implementation is really on the right track and we are not just implementing to tick the boxes. How do you expect, in terms of the specific KPIs, to be spelled out, and then also the checks in place to ensure that this is being done right?
Yeah, so I mean, like with the example of the planning for food and jobs that you mentioned, you see, the problem is not necessarily that the policy wasn't good, but if you're not really addressing the structural issues, what I mean by that is if the fertilizer that you're actually using to put on your farm, right, is still coming in and is still being imported, your exchange rate is all over the place, and some of the other fundamentals, you're going to borrow money from the bank, right, and you have to pay 30% plus interest. There's nothing you can do within that context of that particular policy that would not mean that your prices at the end of the day is still not going to go up, right? So what I think is different this time and what is very clear is trying to connect the dots. So you have specific sector interventions, such as in the agro-processing, which is very similar to planting for food and jobs, right? But you have also interventions to make sure that those supply side constraints are actually being addressed. And then you also have a demand side response, right, to that. So, I mean, they talk about, for example, turning the whole water lake into they call it a Eden water bread basket. And they've actually put this into 16 clusters under this 24-hour economy concept, right? And this allows you to then have those economies of scale and agglomeration effects. And then when you again look at the indicators, like I said, what is going to be important at the end of the day? How do we measure success? For example, on the productivity front, you're looking at how your total factor productivity increases. You're looking at the number or the area of farm or food that you're cultivating. You're looking on the logistics side, how you're improving in your business or doing business indicators.
Right.
And you're looking at how ultimately this actually impacts collectively on growth.
But Doc, I just wanted to hold you on this because you asked a question earlier as to the $4 billion estimated cost of the implementation of this policy. Where is the money going to come from? There were some details given to an answer to that question. I'm going to put that on the screen right now. This is according to government where we're going to get the money from, and this is it. First off, they indicated that $300 million is going to be some sort of a seed money. That's 7% of the amount, seed money from government. Then there's going to be the public-private partnership agreements via the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund. And then also there is the $148 million of the 2025 National Assembly's Common Fund for the 24-hour markets as well allocated. And then you talked about the crowdfunding and others, meaning that we're all supposed to somehow chip in. That's the expectation. Does that answer the question for you?
Yes, precisely, and what I also talked about. And, the crowdfunding bit, the chipping in, you're not chipping in, it's not charity. You're actually going to get a return on your investment, right?
Yeah.
And you also have some bits coming, like you mentioned, from Development Bank Ghana, Venture Capital Trust Fund, and some other additional monies in there. I think what is also important going forward for me then is for us to break the whole program down. The document is quite big, but let's break it down into sort of an implementation roadmap, right? So what are we expecting to do or see within 2025, then 26, 27, 28? I am sure that the people working on this would have something already, if not prepared. But that also helps actually track the meeting of the targets and the indicators in that regard.
Certainly. And this is just the beginning of, as you have indicated, breaking down the document. We're going to have to also try and do our part in that regard, Doc, is it not? So we'll be having conversations in the coming days as we get into much more detail.